Good evening, my treasured brothers and sisters, esteemed elders of the community, those whose backs remember the weight, and whose eyes have witnessed the long journey. Let the sanctuary of this moment settle upon you. We turn our gaze not to the local pulpit, but to the global stage, the towering, unforgiving arena of the United Nations. The General Assembly is in its 80th year, yet the conflict remains ancient. The powerful versus the defiant. Today, a single figure stands under the glare of those cold global lights. His name is Ibrahim Traoré, president of a nation known as Burkina Faso. He is young, yes, but he carries the age of 1,000 struggles. They have placed a file before him, a pre-written confession, a 12-page script of subjugation drafted in London, Brussels, and D.C. It is an expectation of surrender. But look at the quiet fire in his eyes. He did not come here to read their lines. He came to reclaim his own story. He came carrying not a diplomatic pouch, but the heavy, unbowed spirit of an entire continent. Millions are waiting to see if he will kneel, or if he will draw a line in the marble floor of that hall. This is not politics, my family. This is prophecy. This is the ultimate confrontation between the ledger of shame and the birth of a new dignity. If your spirit recognizes this call for justice, if you understand that the fight for freedom is indivisible, I beseech you, tap that subscribe button right now. Join our fellowship of truth-tellers, for the story we share today is a sacred covenant. Let us contemplate the profound gravity of Ibrahim Traoré's solitary stand. The chamber is packed, a tapestry of nations, but every eye in that room is an unblinking witness, a silent judge. The air is so thick with expectation that you could carve it with a knife. This is the hush not of reverence, but of predatory scrutiny. They expect the young man to falter. He knows the protocol. He understands the power structure. He is aware that the file before him, deceptively thin, holds the ink of centuries, the ink of agreements signed when African hands were tied, when promises were exchanged for illusions. This scripted confession is designed not merely to embarrass his nation, but to extinguish the spark of its latest revolution. But the man from Ouagadougou carries within him a counter-narrative. He is cloaked not in power, but in moral authority. He embodies the legacy of every African who has dared to say no more. He carries the weight of the gold and the copper and the cocoa stolen generation after generation. His presence is a walking, breathing monument to resilience. He thinks, I imagine, of the mothers whose grief is silent, of the children who dream under leaky roofs, and of the forgotten soldiers who died for a dignity their nation had not yet fully attained. They are the chorus in his heart, pushing him toward the podium. He is here because of them. He is here to answer not to the powerful nations arrayed against him, but to the impoverished millions who deserve a voice that is unbought and unafraid. He stands at the lectern, his soldier's uniform a stark contrast to the tailored suits surrounding him. He does not carry his own notes, only the instrument of his intended humiliation. The world leans in. Will he lift it? Will he let them see the moment he signs his nation's submission? No. He pauses. The stillness is absolute. And then he acts, with the measured power of a man performing a sacred rite. The president of Burkina Faso uses one hand to close the folder. He presses the cover down, a quiet, definitive rejection. It is the sound of a door slamming shut on the past. The silence that follows is the sound of history changing direction. The accused has now become the accuser. The script of their making lies discarded, but the real test is yet to come. What is the sermon of truth that this young captain will preach now? That he has discarded their chapter and begun to write his own. The stillness breaks, not with a shout, but with a deliberate low voice that gains power with every syllable. The man from Ouagadougou speaks. He speaks of the things they have successfully buried under decades of diplomatic silence. Let us speak of the first great theft, he begins. The first crime. The sheer brutality of the Middle Passage. 12 million of our ancestors stolen, forming the very wealth and infrastructure of the West. He declares that the foundation of their prosperity is literally built upon our bones. The second crime. The CFA franc, the mechanism of economic control. He does not just mention the system. He details the staggering figure. Over $500 billion of African wealth locked away in the French treasury. This is not aid, it is extortion. The third crime. The genocide in Rwanda. He faces the hard truth, naming the complicity of foreign powers in the loss of 800,000 souls. The chamber's tension becomes a palpable, living thing. The fourth crime. The crushing burden of debt. He reveals the math of poverty. $685 billion owed, a debt that forces nations to choose between medicine for their children and repayment to their creditors. He calls out the fifth crime, the deliberate destruction of African agriculture, where forced liberalization by global corporations, Nestlé and Cargill, ensures that when the African farmer starves, the foreign company thrives. The sixth crime, the assassination of leaders. He invokes the martyrs, Patrice Lumumba in Congo, Thomas Sankara in Burkina Faso. He reminds them that every time a voice called for genuine African sovereignty, that voice was silenced, but the cry for freedom never truly died. He lists the seventh crime, the Cold War's betrayal, where arms dealers and dictators were funded while development was starved. The eighth crime, the ecological devastation of oil extraction in Nigeria by companies like ExxonMobil and Total, where land is poisoned and life expectancy plummets. The ninth crime, foreign military occupation. He counts the bases, 29 American, 10 French. Every base, asserts President Traoré, is a chain on our independence. They call it stability, we call it colonization. Finally, the young captain delivers the 10th crime, the weaponization of human rights, selectively sanctioning nations that resist Western interests while rewarding those that comply. For them, he states with chilling clarity, human rights are merely a foreign policy tool. By the conclusion of this 10-point indictment, the polite facade of the UN has shattered. This young man has done what no older statesman dared to do. He has exposed the entire system. He has pointed the finger at the crime scene. But who are the individuals who signed the papers, who commanded the plots, and who profited from the silence? The young captain is about to name them, and the silence will be deafening. President Traoré scans the room. The moment for diplomacy has passed. Now is the moment for moral clarity. He addresses the gatekeepers directly. Emmanuel Macron, he declares, the accusation hanging heavy. You are sitting atop an empire built on the graves and the resources of our people. The French delegation is visibly reeling. Donald Trump, he continues, your business is not peace, it is profit. Your trade deals are simply blood money wrapped in paper. American diplomats remain stone-faced, but their discomfort is palpable. And finally, to the architects of global finance, to the board of the IMF, you are not aid workers. You are the wardens of a financial prison designed to perpetuate the dependency of the South. The impact of these targeted words is stunning. There is no immediate applause, only the heavy, disquieting silence of exposed guilt. Western delegates are caught, scribbling frantically, a futile attempt to capture and control a truth that has escaped. Across the African bloc, however, you can feel the rising heat of pride. Shoulders are pulled back. Dignity is reclaimed. The voice of the ancestors knows this speech will be censored. He knows the paperwork will be manipulated to exclude his words from the official UN record. But in this digital age, censorship is merely a signal. By midnight, the message will have escaped. The transcript will be flying across the globe. in the crowded markets of Lagos, in the university halls of Dakar, in the shanty towns of Soweto, students and citizens will be gathering around flickering screens. The phrase, "We demand justice," will be projected onto monuments. The hashtags will burn across the internet in a dozen African languages. This is more than a speech. It is a spark. It is a moment of collective psychological emancipation. What the West intended as a single moment of humiliation has become a continental bonfire of resistance. But a symbolic victory must be translated into real power. The world has heard the noise. But how will African leaders, the ones who benefit from the status quo, respond to this profound challenge? Tell me in the comments below. Which two African nations must publicly endorse this speech next week to ensure this moment is not just a fleeting spectacle? And now, my dearest family, let us trace the path of this fire until it lands right here, in the heart of our community. This is not a foreign affair. This is family business. The deep resonance of the voice of the ancestors reaches across the Atlantic because the suffering is shared and the demand is the same. This is the modern culmination of our civil rights legacy. Think of the oratory style, the slow, rhythmic build-up, the historical reference, the prophetic indictment. It is the language of the pulpit, the sound of the civil rights preachers of the 1960s, the fiery delivery of our own moral giants. In churches across Atlanta, Detroit, and Birmingham, the sermons on Sunday will echo this message. Pastors will compare the courage of the young captain to the uncompromising spirit of Malcolm X, who dared to accuse a system that had tried to write his people's confession. They will see in his rejection of the script the same act of dignity that fueled the Montgomery bus boycott. Our legacy is built on the refusal to accept a forced narrative. The African American intellectual community understands this truth. The fight for land rights in the Delta and the fight for African sovereignty in the Sahel are two fronts in the same eternal war against the logic of exploitation. When the president of Burkina Faso speaks of dignity, he speaks the language of Frederick Douglass, of Maya Angelou, and of the millions who marched for equal rights. The power of this moment lies in its spiritual unity. It proves that the yearning for self-determination did not end when the physical chains were removed. It merely transformed into the demand for economic and political freedom. But the spiritual connection is easy to feel. The hard question is this: how do we, the African diaspora, transform this shared pride into a sustained, practical alliance that provides real resources and political cover for leaders like this young man? The applause has faded, and the delegates are gone, but the consequence of this day remains. The president of Burkina Faso has bought his nation dignity, but he has purchased it at the highest price. We must speak plainly about the danger. The ghosts of the heroes he invoked, Lumumba and Sankara, serve as chilling reminders. Defiance is met not only with sanctions, but with plots, the fear of financial pressure, the threat of destabilization, and the possibility of assassination are now his daily bread. Yet, this peril is also the measure of his triumph. Ibrahim Traoré has irrevocably shifted the conversation. He has forced the world to choose. Do you stand with the old powers who demand submission, or do you stand with the newly awakened people who demand justice? Internally, Africa faces its own challenge. The fire of resistance burns, but it can also be used to divide. Leaders who have benefited from the old system will be forced to choose between the comfortable compromise and the dangerous necessary truth. This is the difficult path to genuine African sovereignty. The man from Ouagadougou has given us a clear roadmap, a doctrine for the future, distilled into 4 spiritual tenets: dignity, the refusal to be defined by your oppressor; memory, the understanding that history is not past, it is present; courage, the strength to speak truth to power when the price is highest; and identity, the absolute rejection of imitation in favor of authentic self-rule. He concluded by saying, "We did not ask permission to be free. We stood up to claim it." This truth is undeniable, but the world is waiting for the follow-up. Will this be a flash of fire or the sustained, controlled burn of revolution? And so we leave the marble halls of the United Nations, but the spirit of that day, my family, must remain within us. We have borne witness to a transfer of power, not political, but moral. A young African leader stood against the old world and declared that the time for silence is over. He has made it clear that the demand for African sovereignty is a fundamental moral imperative. It is the unfinished business of the 20th century, and it must be completed now. This is a story that should comfort and inspire us, for it is the continuation of our own sacred text. The courage he displayed is the very fiber of our civil rights legacy, linking the bus boycott to the fight for economic liberation in the Sahel. The final question is not for Ibrahim Traoré. It is for us. He delivered the charge sheet. Now we must act as the jury. He has demonstrated that the battle for African sovereignty is real. Will you allow this monumental moment to fade into the background noise? Or will you use it as fuel for your own purpose? Are you in your life still waiting for the approval, the validation, or the permission of the very systems that seek to hold you down? Or are you ready right now to stand in your own truth and demand what is right? If this message has awakened something deep within you, if you feel the pulse of history in your own chest, I offer you this emotional challenge. Do not let this courage die on your screen. Share this powerful sermon with 3 elders you respect and 3 young people who need to see a face of defiance. And right now, seal this vow by leaving a comment below using the single word, unbowed. Let us stand together, digitally and spiritually, in this demand for global justice. God bless you, and may your dignity never be compromised.